Hello, my name is Gersende Bonin. When I was first invited to prepare this talk, I kept thinking, I do not know where to start. And maybe that was the first honest thing. Because sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones we have been living for so long, we no longer see them as stories. We see them as character, as success, as simply who we are. I grew up believing that if I wanted to be taken seriously, I had to become harder, sharper, more competitive, more self-contained. And for a long time, that worked. It helped me achieve. It helped me survive. It helped me belong in places where softness did not seem welcome. But over time, I started to wonder something. What if the very qualities that help many women of my generation succeed are also the ones that left some of us with regrets? What if, in learning how to function in an environment shaped by masculine codes, we also learn to silence parts of ourselves we would one day desperately miss? That is what I want to explore with you today. Not whether ambition is wrong, not whether strength is wrong, but whether adaptation has a cost, and whether some of us only discover that cost much later. The first place I learned this was at home. I grew up in a family of 4 girls, and for a long time I did not think my relationship with my father was especially different from the one he had with my sisters. Not in any way I could have named then. But there were moments where he expected more from me. Moments when he would say, almost casually, "It's different for your sisters." And even if I could not have explained it all at the time, I think I understood that something in me was being called forward differently. Maybe because I was the eldest. Maybe because I was the scientific one. Maybe because, as a child, I was a tomboy. I loved risk. I loved climbing trees. I loved challenge. My father was a brilliant man. He had done impressive studies, built a remarkable career, and had a very scientific mind. Among my sisters, I was the one most naturally share that part of him. So we found each other there, in the intellect, in rigor, in challenge, in strength. At the time, that felt special. It felt like being trusted, like being seen, like being invited into a world of seriousness, intelligence, and possibility. It is only in retrospect that I have come to see something more complicated in that dynamic. That perhaps in his eyes and in mine, I was not only his daughter, but also stepping into a place shaped by expectations, more often reserved for boys. And hidden inside, that was a lesson I did not yet know I was learning. That if I wanted closeness, recognition, legitimacy to meet him there, I had to be strong. I had to be impressive. I had to be capable. I had to lean away from what the world expected a girl to be. No one said those words to me. That is not usually how these things happen. They become an atmosphere before they become a sentence. So I absorbed it, not as pain, as identity. And identities like that can be very efficient. They help you function. They help you achieve. They help you belong in worlds that already know how they measure value. That identity followed me into my career. I became a diving instructor in France at a time when, for the state-level qualification, there was no separate female scale. There was one standard based on men's performance. And I was proud of that. Proud that I could level up. Proud that I could meet the same criteria. Proud that being a woman would not stop me from achieving at the same level. That pride was real. I do not want to rewrite that part of my life dishonestly. It mattered to me. It shaped me. But looking back, I can see that I was learning more than discipline or resilience. I was learning to measure my worth against a standard I had not created. I was learning that recognition came through endurance, toughness, and comparison. I was learning that success meant adapting myself to what was already valued, rather than asking whether that standard itself was too narrow. And the world rewards that adaptation. You become the woman who can handle it, the woman who is not too emotional, the woman who does not need special consideration, the woman who can keep up. Everyone calls that strength, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it is also a quiet kind of self-erasure. And it did not stop at work. It entered my relationship too. I remember once driving with my partner to meet his brother and sister-in-law for the first time. And I said to him, almost casually, but not really joking, please do not leave me alone with your sister-in-law. I will have nothing to talk about with her. I would rather stay with you and your brother so that we can have interesting conversations. At the time, I believed that. I genuinely felt more comfortable with men. I found it easier to enter their conversations, their rhythms, their subjects. With women, I often felt awkward, impatient, disconnected. And now when I look back on that moment, I hear something much sadder underneath it. I hear a woman who had learned that value lived in the spaces men occupied. A woman who had learned to distance herself from other women in order to feel distinct. A woman who had unconsciously absorbed the idea that what was coded feminine was somehow smaller, less serious, less interesting. Not because she disliked women, but because she had spent years learning how to succeed by leaning away from anything the world dismissed in women. And that is one of the quietest costs of adaptation. Sometimes what helps you rise also separates you from other women, from tenderness, from parts of yourself. And then life does what life always does. It strips away performance. It strips away control. It strips away all the roles we have learned so well. My father became very ill. I remember walking past his bedroom one evening. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, connected to oxygen, very frail, with a book resting on his lap. And I said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he replied, "I'm reading. I can't hold the book anymore. It's too heavy. I don't have enough strength, so this is the only way I can read." And in that moment, something shifted. I was no longer looking at the strong, brilliant, towering man of my childhood. I was looking at someone vulnerable, someone diminished, someone deeply human. And what I saw, strangely, was almost a little boy. And in that moment, I felt a huge wave rise in me. Not admiration, not discipline, not the need to say the right thing, just the simple human desire to hug him, to cross the room, put my arms around him, to let love speak in the most ordinary way. And I did not. I held back because that was how I had learned to be with him. That was not the language of our relationship. Strength was, admiration was, restraint was, but tenderness had never really been rehearsed. And a short time later, he was gone. So when I think now about what this way of being gave me, confidence, drive, resilience, the ability to walk into difficult spaces and hold my own, I also think about what it may have taken from me. I think about cost of becoming so well adapted to a certain idea of strength. I think about how many women of my generation learned to survive, to compete, to be respected by adopting the codes rewarded by the world around us. And I think about how complicated it feels now, in a time when those codes are more openly questioned, when the gender gap is criticized more clearly, when we are asked to imagine other ways of being. Because some of us built ourselves according to rules that are now being challenged. And while that is progress, it can also leave us with a strange private grief. Grief for the tenderness we learned to suppress. Grief for the connection we sometimes sacrifice. Grief for the moments we did not know how to inhabit because we had become so practiced at being strong. So I'm not here today to reject strength. I'm here to ask what kind of strength we want to carry forward. A strength that helps us compete, yes, but also a strength that lets us connect. A strength that earns respect, yes, but also a strength that does not silence tenderness. A strength that does not leave us armored in the moments that most require love. Because success can open many doors, but it cannot take you back into one room, one evening, besides one bed, and help you do the one thing your heart knew to do. I so wish I had hugged him.